Hey guys, I'm Alan and welcome to the very first episode of our In Focus series by the Styrene Air Force. The first of many, I hope, where we'll be looking at various techniques and how they're applied and other various aspects of the scale modeling hobby. Today I have on my Canada Forces hat. You can just call me crew chief for this adventure. I won't mind. First things first. The stuff that we're going to be discussing in these videos, I just want to make everybody know this is just the way I do things. A lot of these techniques are pretty general and a lot of people do them differently. What I'm going to demonstrate is the way they've worked for me. So I'm not necessarily saying what I'm doing here or showing is the exact right way. Second thing I want to bring up, if you do like this video, please subscribe at the end and click that notification bell so that you can be notified of any future episodes. Also, you can go and like us on Facebook or follow us on Facebook at the Styrene Air Force. Okay, so if that's all done, let's get on with it. Okay, so chipping. What exactly is chipping? I know I don't need to explain to a lot of you what chipping is, but just give you a quick basic definition of it. Chipping is an effect where a top layer of paint has been removed by some means, exposing a lower or a bottom color. In the scale modeling world, it doesn't matter if it's flaking, peeling, chipping, stripped off, falling off, whatever. We just tend to just refer to it all as chipping. So as far as we're concerned, everything's chipping. Regardless of the methodology behind doing chipping, they basically fall into three categories. The first category is going to be an additive method. The second category will be subtractive. And our third and final category will be masking. Now let's look at these three categories a little bit closer as to exactly what's involved. Okay, so for additive, this is when the chipping color is applied or added over the base color to produce the chipping effect. Subtractive is when the top color is removed or subtracted to reveal a chipping color underneath the top layer. And masking is where the chipping effect is created by using a mask between the chipping color and the main color, and then removing the mask reveals the effects. So whether you're trying to get the effect of peeled paint, worn paint, chipped paint, or scratches, or even as far as to go with rusty paint, you are going to employ at least one or multiples of these three different categories. Oh, I'm going to be demonstrating all three of these categories, and just to go that little extra, just to make this an extra value video, I am going to attempt to do at least three different techniques for each category. So, you know, three types of additive, three types of subtracting, and three types of masking. So we're going to demonstrate all of that. For most of this demonstration, I'm going to be using pretty much some very high contrasting colors. So we're going to be seeing a lot of black, a lot of silver, and probably a lot of white. Most cases maybe just a black and silver. But that is just so that you can see the full effect of what's happening and what to expect. So that being said, we're going to dive into the first category. Okay, so the first category we're looking at is in the additive, and we're going to look at applying paint chips by paintbrush. So what I've got here is I've got an old Spitfire here that I just painted up with some black primer just to give you your background, and we're going to add those paint chips with Vallejo's Bottle Ear Steel. So the best way to get this going is we'll get a little drop. I just got a little water bottle top here, and we'll just get a couple drops in there. Now a lot of people do recommend thinning down this water a little bit. Most people like to use something like a paint retarder or a flow improver to keep it from drying too fast. Thing I can use here right now just for this demonstration is we'll just use a little water. Gonna get a really thin paintbrush, very fine tipped. This is not one of my best ones. In fact, I don't really have a best one because I don't particularly like using a brush to do paint chips. So I'm gonna get that going, and then all we're just gonna do is make sure you have your references nearby and of what you want to replicate. So you're just basically going to roll off the tip there, and then you're just going to start adding little bits of silver paint here. But you also want to make sure that your brush is kind of dry. You don't want to have it too much in there. And then you're just going to keep adding little paint chips like this, going in and adding on all of that on there, just getting an idea of how you want your chips to go. So we're just going to look at that, and then we're just going to do this. Now for me, like I said, I don't really like using a brush, but I'm going to use this here right now just to lay out some of the basic chipping technique. And then what you do is you get all of that. We're just going to do something that's going to look like root chipping, like that. And then we're going to get all of that into there, like that. So that's basically how you're going to look at it. It's just basic, simple, and you've got a lot of control over this because you can only put the chips right where you want them. If I had a smaller brush or a finer brush, I could certainly do a little bit better with it. But we're just getting the basic foundation there for what's going to go. Now for me, what I like to do, and we're still going to put this under the category of using a brush, is I like to use a toothpick because it's got a really fine tip and everything. You can use the same mixture in it. Just dip the tip in, and then you can add some really fine stuff after that. Yes, it takes a lot longer, but you can do a lot more with it. You can feather it all out a little bit more. You can make your chips bigger, lighter, smaller. You can just do stuff like that. And just keep, working in and around some of these bigger things like this. And then you just start adding all of this crap in like that. And you just build on it if you want. You can add some extra stuff here. You can get it. You can add, scratch lines if you want. Add all lines. You can add more scratches in. Stuff like that. And you can just build on this. Slowly, piece by piece. And then you can just add in like that. Just keep adding. And just keep adding to where, you get to the point that you actually like what you have. You can just get it in there, go up the side of the thing. You can add some more shapes in here. You can add all of that. Just keep touching in, following along the top here. You can go in, follow the edge of the wing root here. Just start adding some stuff in there. And just keep building it all up. If you see stuff where you think you might have added too much, no big deal. You can just go back in and, get some of the black and then just start filling back in some of the areas with the black. Just keep going. So you just keep adding and keep touching in. Now, clearly, I'm not one of the best people at this. There are guys out there, much better at this than I am. You can also go in, you can add the chipping, to look like rivets. You can just add those in like this. Just come across little dots how you want it. You can add little dots going across, going down the root of the plane. Just put in little dots, get a little idea of rivet work. Yeah, even when there's no rivets there, so you can actually do that and get something that looks like, you know, you got rivets in the surface. Just pretty much keep going till you've got it to the point, you know, that you're happy with. And that's it. So that's pretty much one of the ways you can do it. So, just so that you can get an idea, that is your chipping by paintbrush. One of the techniques that you can use to do chipping on any model. Another way of doing the painting on chips is to do something called two-stage chipping. I'm sure if you ask different people what this thing is called, and they may all give you completely different answers. So this is going to be basically painting on the chips, but also adding a secondary color, as if the paint chip was fresh and then going down through to the primer coat or down to the metal. This is primarily used mostly by armor builders and vehicle builders and some sci-fi builders. It's not something that is necessarily associated too often with aircraft building, but it is possible to use it. So we're just going to go ahead and take a quick look at that. I'm just going to do this real quick because I just want to get through all these different techniques as fast as possible and not end up with a 3-hour video. So right here we've got a base color of Mission Models green, and then we're going to add a lighter color as if it were a fresher chip, using Tamiya's gray green. So the basic premise behind it is that you're just going to paint on a lighter color your base coat. This is something you see a lot people use mostly along edges and that sort of stuff going in. And again, you would probably thin down your paint. Like I said, I'm not really doing that. This is just to demonstrate the process. This is not an actual project or anything that I'm trying to do, so we're just going to do the basics of this. Now this is just another thing you could do. You could actually just do this all by itself to with just this to have the lighter color, just to show fresh scratches, like, you know, that hasn't gone all the way through. Sure, if you've seen little scratches on the sides of your car or on the paint of your vehicle, where it just scrapes the clear coat, you'll see that it kind of has this lighter color, almost white in most cases. That's the part we're trying to replicate here. So we got it going like that, and then you can get it, you know, done out in an area like here, kind of a thing like that. And even if you wanted to, you could, you know, get a little bit of a scratch like that. So this is kind of the effect that you're going for. The second stage of doing this two-stage is to add what would be the second color. In this case, usually the second color is either an extremely darkened version of the green or whatever color you've used as your base, or a black or a dark gray or a very dark metallic color. In the case of armor builders, where it's showing that it's going all the way through to the steel base and it's either oxidized or, you know, it's got dirt accumulation in it. But the point being is, the second color is usually extremely dark or much darker than the first two colors. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to apply this darker color inside the border of the lighter color that you used. What you're going to end up with is an almost three-dimensional type effect. You just want to stay within the center almost. You can go up to an edge, you know, if you want to have a slightly different shade to the darker side. just add in, just a little darker scrape of the darker color by itself off to the side here. Just to get that, like that one was just a complete scrape. And you don't have to do it to every single one. I mean, you can mix it up, and you can have some spots there, like just want to show where it just periodically, in just in little random spots where it goes all the way through. And then you can get to the little scrape, and you can just do that. So that's basically the type of effect that you're after. Let's get it a little closer to the camera so you can see that. And this is just another, dimension that you can go with painting on the chips with a brush. Now with this technique of applying chips, of course it does come with certain advantages and disadvantages. The first advantage is that it's very easy to control, because you can only put chips exactly where you want it. You have full control over where it's applied, the shape it's applied, how it's applied. Put down basically a clear coat before adding the paint chips. Once it's basically dry to touch, you can clean off excess. You can just scrape it off a little bit and fine tune the shape and the size of the chip that you're getting on there. One of the third advantages is that it can be done very convincingly. It can look very realistic if done correctly, which also is part of the disadvantage of it. It is a very hard thing to master. It's got a pretty steep learning curve, and if it isn't done correctly, it can look like it's just, painted on, which is not the effect that you want to do. It's harder to make it random because there's a tendency when doing it to adopt a certain pattern when putting them on, and randomness is what you want for chipping. Another well-known method of applying paint chipping using paints is the sponging method. Now this is one that's been around for a while. A lot of people know this. And it's where you're just using little small sections of sponge to apply the chipping to the model. It's always good to have a large variety of different sponges, as every different sponge will leave a different texture. So you can get different types of chipping, different shapes, different sizing, and so on and so forth. Also, the types that's got the little scouring section, those are also pretty good to use as well. That'll also add some more variety to the type of chipping. The favorite one is the packaging foam kind. It seems to be the one that a lot of people prefer using, and it seems to give quite satisfactory results. Again, this is another method like you see a lot of armor modelers using, but it's also very common with aircraft. It's great for doing edges and leading edges and that sort of stuff on wings and so on and so forth. So we're just going to get right into it, and we're going to look at that. So the idea is to get a small piece of sponge, into tweezers. Some people will use pliers. Some people will just, use their hands and dab it on. Whatever the method is that you use, any one of them are acceptable. Me personally, I prefer these types of tweezers, so the locking type, so it'll actually clamp it in and hold it in there, or in the case of here, these self-closing tweezers. And these can be found on pretty much any one of these, Amazon, AliExpress, whatnot, what have you. But you can find these pretty much anywhere. So basically, thing is, we're going to be using some silver paint here. This is Model Master Enamel Chrome Silver. You can pretty much use any paint for this, but I do find using enamels and oils to be better because the paint workability tends to be a little bit longer. I find the acrylic ones dry too fast, and you got to be changing your foam every 5 seconds. Anyways, let's get on with it. So first thing you want to do is get your bit of foam in there, sponge, and then you're going to just dip it in your paint. and it's going to appear on the end here. What you want to do is kind of unload a lot of this. So get a little piece of paper, you know, and just start unloading it till you get to the area that you want. So once you've got it all pretty much unloaded, you're just going to start dabbing it on the model. You know, where you want to get the chips, how you want to get them. You know, you can get them into little corners and on edges like that. And just keep building into the areas that you want. You can even go into some of the flat areas, but it doesn't lend itself to some of these flat areas, these large open areas too well. It's great doing along edges. And it's also great to rotate it and change it, because what you end up with here is a situation where you get an effect that is almost like stamping. So if you keep using it in one pattern, then it starts to look like the same thing every single time. It's also a good idea, which is why I said get a variety of sponges, to switch up the sponges in between it, and you know, get different textures as well. The other thing is why you want to unload it too, you know, is you don't want to end up coming in and putting on the foam and trying to put on your chip, and then you wind up with that. I mean, even that's not too bad. But if you go on with it too much and you press on it too hard, you end up with that. You don't want to get that. So you just want to make sure that it's fairly unloaded and just very lightly, almost just barely touching the surface. And then you can get that. And that essentially is the basics of using foam or sponge for chipping. Again, as with the other type of chipping, there are some advantages and disadvantages to using sponge chipping. One of the major advantages are it's very easy to do. It's probably one of the simplest forms of chipping that almost anybody between beginner to expert level can do. It tends to give you a much more random type of chipping, because it's just going to end up wherever the piece of sponge makes contact with the surface. I find that you can achieve much smaller chips with this than doing the applying it with a brush, and it gives you much smaller type chippings. And the next thing about it is that you can get more chips in less time in a larger area. Some of the negatives or the disadvantages of it is that it can become very pattern repeating, which is why I suggest rotating your foam every now and then, or using different types of sponges to randomize the patterns. It's not very good also to use on very large and open flat areas. I wouldn't recommend using it too much for that. It is possible to do it, but it's not the very best thing for that type of a thing. Okay, one of the final methods in the additive category is applying chipping using colored pencils. So for that, we're going to be using this Prismacolor Silver, and I'm going to use this 5B graphite pencil. Things to note about this, it's best if they're applied over a flat surface, because you need something for the pencil lead to grab onto. Putting it on a gloss surface is not ideal. It just slides just all over the place. It doesn't actually mark the surface. And satin coats will probably work as well, but not quite as good as matte coats. You can pretty much use any set of colored crayons to do this, or colored pencils, but I do find the Prismacolor brand to be much better for it. Also because the Prismacolors, they tend to have more of an oil-based core versus a lot of the other standard school-use colored pencils that have more of a wax-based core. So that being said, these can actually go on and be blended almost, you know, with mineral spirits like an oil paint. But that is something we will look at later. You can pretty much use any graphite pencil for chipping as well. Anything from a 2B onwards would be best. They go all the way up to 12B. You might be able to get those in specialty art stores in some places. Right now we're just going to use 5B. This is also great for using darker metallic type chips. So what we're going to basically do here with it is, again, make sure you have your references because that's always crucial. And then we're just going to basically just draw the chips on. So you're just going to, this is a practice that has been long forgotten with a lot of people because there's so many different modeling based products that are out there. So this is kind of almost like a bit of a lost art, but it is a technique that's out there that's available. So basically the idea is just to start with a bunch of little dots. And you can make them as small or as many as you want, and just keep kind of tapping and overlapping with them till you get what you want. Or you can actually just draw in a shape that you want and just color it in. And then you can come in, add some of the other chipping in and around it. You can do little squigglies or little scrapes. But this is the sort of thing that you can also achieve as far as chipping goes. You see a little bit of it right there in the wing root there. If you want, now you can get out and expand it a little bit more. Just turn it at an angle that you can actually see. You can start graduating out into the wing. So it's basically like painting the chips on. You're just using a pencil instead. You can do little things, those scrapes going off. You can get a scratch there and just build off of it there. Follow along this line. Carry down like that. Same thing here. You can follow along some of these rivet lines here if you want. I know it's not exactly cooperating with me. And you could just build it up to where you want it. And also, like the doing it with a paintbrush, it does take a little bit of time to master and practice and stuff. But the most common color to use for something like this is silver. But in reality, you can use pretty much any color. You can go back to where we were doing the two-stage chipping where you're painting it on, where you can actually use a lighter color of the base color. So if you're going to invest in these, they do come in sets of 12, 24, 36, 48, 72. But I wouldn't waste the money buying the sets because there's a lot of colors in the sets that are basically irrelevant to the hobby. They do sell them as individuals, so I would suggest getting them in the individuals and get the silver, white, black, that sort of stuff. And then when you get to some of the other colors like grays and greens and browns, you pretty much just want something that's in a light, medium, dark. Because that's pretty much the only place that you're going to stay in with it. Other colors that I would probably suggest would be something maybe in a darker red for red chipping, and maybe a greenish yellow for aircraft chipping. Now you can do it with a silver like that, or if you've got lighter surfaces, that's where you can come in with the graphite pencil. Pretty much the same approach. So right now I'm just going to focus here on just this wing root here, just so you can see. And it's just basically the same thing, just dots and dashes and little squigglies, and you can color in a whole area if you want. Just like that, around that rivet kind of a thing. just build it up slowly. Now again, I'm not focusing on too much detail here. I'm just giving you an idea of, how you can use the materials. So you can get all the way out here, and you can get a couple of chips there, right there as well. You can go around this fuel probe here. You can get some other chipping type effects on it. And that's the sort of stuff that you can do with. As with all the other techniques that we've discussed so far, using colored pencils also has its advantages and its disadvantages. Many of its advantages are going to be similar to painting on the chipping, so you've got total control over what you're doing, so you can decide where they go, how they go, what shape they are, how intense they're going to be, how big an area you're going to cover with it. Because they're also colored pencils and pencils, you can correct any mistake. If you have something that you don't like, it's just as simple as much as pulling an eraser and just basically rubbing them off. It's very easy to do. Basically, like drawing on paper, you're just drawing on your model. When it's done correctly, it can look very convincing, which also, like doing the paint chipping with paintbrushes, is also its Achilles heel. It is hard to master. It does take some practice, and if it isn't applied properly, it can look pretty fake. So, that being said, that is pretty much the end of the additive methods of doing chipping. So we're going to move on to our next category, which is going to be subtractive.